I call to order the November 28th, 2023 regular meeting of the Minneapolis Heritage Preservation Commission. For the record, my name is Barbara Howard and I'm the chair of the commission. Just a reminder, please silence your cell phones. And if you are speaking at the dais or giving public testimony, to speak directly into the microphone when you're giving any kind of testimony. Would the clerk please call the roll so we verify the presence of a quorum?
Commissioner Bjornberg.
Present.
Booty.
Present.
Chair Howard.
Present.
Melblom.
Present.
Nystrom.
Present.
Vice Chair Sandbolt.
Present.
Maston.
Present.
Struthers.
Present.
Vander Eyck.
Here.
There are 9 members present.
Thank you. Let the record reflect we do have quorum. Our first order of business is to adopt an agenda for this meeting. We'll work from the agendas that are available over by the clerk, and I'll go through and sort out any items to be withdrawn, continued, which ones will be discussed, and which items we put on a consent agenda to be approved and as recommended by staff, and without further discussion. So, item number 4, 516 Hennepin Avenue, currently in Ward 3. In 2024, it'll be in Ward 7. This application is for a certificate of appropriateness. Item number 4 will be on consent unless someone wants to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation. Item number 5, 2507 First Avenue South, Ward 10. This application is for a certificate of appropriateness. Item number 5 will be on consent unless someone wants to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendations. Item number 6, 2220 Clinton Avenue South, also in Ward 10. This application is for a certificate of appropriateness. Item number 6 will be on consent unless someone wants to speak in opposition to or modify the staff recommendation. Item number 7, 619 10th Street South, currently in Ward 7, will be in Ward 6 in 2024. This application is for a certificate of appropriateness. Item number 7 will be discussed with a public hearing. Item number 8, Washburn Fair Oaks Historic District Guidelines. This application is just for discussion without a public hearing. Item number 9 is the January-February 2024 HPC calendar adoption, and that will also be for discussion without a public hearing. So the proposed agenda, bear with me. The consent agenda will include the following 3 items. Item number 4, 516 Hennepin Avenue, Ward 3, currently, and in Ward 7 in 2024. Item number 5, 2507 First Avenue South in Ward 10. Item number 6, 2220 Clinton Avenue South, Ward 10. Is there any opposition from commissioners to the staff recommendations for these 3 items? Is there anyone in the public that wishes to speak in opposition to staff recommendations for these 3 items? Hearing no opposition to placing these items on consent, we will approve these consent items in one motion at the start of the meeting. The following items will have staff presentation, public comment, and commission discussion and action. Just item number 7, 619 10th Street South, currently in Ward 7, in Ward 6 in 2024. The following 2 items will have staff presentation and commission discussion without a public hearing. That's item number 8, Washburn Fair Oaks Historic District Design Guidelines, and item number 9, the January-February 2024 Heritage Preservation Commission calendar adoption. Commissioners, may I have a motion to approve the proposed agenda?
Nystrom, so moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Nystrom. Is there a second?
Maston seconds.
Thank you, Commissioner Maston. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? Our next order of business will be to approve the minutes from our last meeting. It was October 24th, 2023. May I have a motion to approve those minutes?
Sandbolt, so moved.
Thank you, Vice Chair Sandbolt. Is there a second?
Struthers, seconds.
Thank you, Commissioner Struthers. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. Any abstentions?
Maston abstains.
Thank you, Commissioner Maston. The minutes are approved. So before I open the hearing to public comments, let me summarize the process for the public hearings. First, we will act on the consent agenda that we just set. Once items on the consent agenda are approved, the commission is done with those items and applicants may contact the planning staff tomorrow about next steps for those projects. After the consent agenda items are approved, we'll take each of the remaining agenda items in order. Planning staff will present its report and commissioners may ask questions of staff. Then I'll open the public hearing and we'll hear from the applicant, and then commissioners may also ask questions of the applicant. After that, we invite public comment. If you wish to speak, you need to do two things. Please be sure you sign up on the sheet over by the clerk. If you haven't done this already, you can do so after the fact. When you come up to testify, you must state your name and address for the record, and be sure to keep your comments specific to the application that's before us today. If you happen to have any materials to hand out, be sure to give them to our committee clerk so that they can be distributed to the commission and entered into the public record. Do not approach the commissioners on the dais. After the public comments are complete, I'll close the hearing, and then commissioners will deliberate and act on the applications before us. So let's get started with the consent agenda. I will now open the public hearing on the consent agenda items. Item number 4, 516 Hennepin Avenue, Ward 3 currently, Ward 7 in 2024. Item number 5, 2507 First Avenue South, Ward 10. 2220 Clinton Avenue South, Ward 10. Once again, do commissioners oppose the staff recommendations for these items? Are there any members of the public who oppose the staff recommendations for these 3 items? Seeing none, I will now close the public hearing on the consent agenda items. May I have a motion to approve the staff findings and recommendations for these items?
Melblum moves.
Thank you, Commissioner Melblum. Is there a second?
Bjornberg seconds.
Thank you, Commissioner Bjornberg. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed say nay. Any abstentions?
Maston abstains on item number 4.
Thank you, Commissioner Maston. These items are approved as recommended by staff on the agenda. Applicants can contact planning staff about the next steps. So our next item, item number 7, 619 10th Street South, Ward 7 currently, and in Ward 6 in 2024. This application is for a certificate of appropriateness. Staff report is presented by Aaron Kay.
My name is Erin Kay, and I'm a city planner in the Historic Preservation section of the Department of Community Planning and Economic Development, or CPED. I'm here today to present a certificate of appropriateness application for the Hinkle House, which is an individual landmark located at 619 10th Street South. Here you can see the property's location in the Elliott Park neighborhood and a photo of the front elevation taken probably within the last few years. The Hinkle House was designed by master architect William Channing Whitney and constructed in 1886 to 1887. The building is representative of Whitney's early work in the city. It is an excellent example of the Georgian Revival style and attributed to be the first in the state. Several character-defining features are visible here, including the brick cladding, symmetrical facade, grand portico above the main entrance with ionic columns, balustrade along the first-story porch and second-story balcony, decorative stone around the window openings, several arched window openings, a Palladian window above the portico, decorative wood brackets beneath the eaves, dormers, and belted brick chimneys. The building was designed as a single-family home for William H. Hinkle, who was a prominent flour manufacturer. In 1901, the house was purchased by William J. Murphy, who was the Minneapolis Tribune publisher. Murphy passed away in 1918. This property is significant for its association with Hinkle and Murphy, its architecture, and as the work of a master architect. Its period of significance is from 1886 to 1918. The building is now used for offices. The subject of this application is replacement of the wood fascia and removal of the wood brackets beneath the eaves due to rot and pest or rodent infiltration. This work was done without approval. I will begin with a series of historical photographs of the property, explain how the work was done without approval, and then present staff analysis of the proposal. On the left is a photo from 1890 of the house shortly after it was built. It looks relatively similar to how it has looked in recent years. In the top right corner is a photo from 1977. The house is painted white. The picture also shows a fascia obscuring the brackets beneath the eaves. but we don't know when that was installed. Permit records note a few changes over time. For example, the column supports of the front portico were replaced in 1977. As of 1984, when a National Register nomination was prepared, the historic Captain's Walk had been removed from the roof of the building. In 1986, another permit was issued to, quote, restore soffits, frieze, front porch, build widow's walk, insulate exterior walls, end quote. The extent of these alterations are not known. In the bottom right corner is a photo from the 1990s. Note that the image is reversed, so the side elevation you see here should be on the opposite side. The fascia covering the brackets appears to remain at this time. In 1996, there appears to have been a fire, resulting in a state of disrepair as shown in the top photo. Remnants of the wood brackets and wood fascia are visible. After this point, a restoration was undertaken, which we believe was part of a historic tax credit program. On the bottom is a photo from circa 1997 after the restoration was complete. Staff have estimated this date based on other photos in the collection at Hennepin County Library. As you can see, the wood fascia and brackets were reconstructed. In early May 2023, the applicant submitted a building permit application for re-roofing, including shingle replacement and redoing a flat roof, which is located on a side elevation. Staff responded to the request and indicated that a preservation application was needed. The applicant proposed to replace the asphalt shingles in kind and use EPDM, or ethylene propylene diene monomer roofing, on the flat roof portion in kind. Staff determined that a certificate of no change was appropriate for this scope, and staff approved the certificate of no change, and the permit was issued on May 15th, 2023. In July, staff received an inquiry from a member of the public about the work undertaken. They had observed metal covering the fascia and wood brackets. Staff conducted a site visit on July 26, 2023 to confirm. And I have a few photos from that site visit. Here is the front elevation facing northeast, the side elevation facing southeast, and then the northwest elevation. Because the fascia replacement was not part of the approved scope of work, staff directed enforcement staff to issue orders to correct. Staff determined that a certificate of appropriateness application was necessary to seek approval for the work that was already complete. Staff conducted a pre-application meeting with the applicant and learned that the applicant had not included the fascia replacement in the scope of the permit application because this type of work does not require a permit per city guidance. The applicant was not aware that work that does not require a permit would still need to be included in a preservation application. The applicant has provided photos from October 2022 that shows the condition of the wood fascia and its deterioration. So here's one photo, and another photo, and then another detail. The applicant said that the wood rot in the brackets was discovered in June 2023 as the project got underway and after the building permit was issued. They wanted to work quickly to address the issue and prevent further issues that can come with rotting wood. They removed the wood brackets and covered the location of the decorative wood cornice line, including where wood brackets were located. Staff's analysis of the project focuses on the impacts of the project on the property's integrity and its compliance with the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. There are no design guidelines associated with this landmark. Based on permit records and photographs, it appears that the fascia was replaced in 1986 and also in 1996 during the restoration project. In 1996, the fascia was replaced in kind using wood. Any damage to the wood brackets from the fire also appears to have been addressed with in-kind replacement. The applicant selected a metal fascia for several reasons: durability, resistance to moisture and pest damage, and low maintenance. The new fascia follows the irregular roof line of the building, and the applicant also removed the heavy vegetation that had grown around the roof line, which also contributes to moisture, rot, and pest issues. Just go back to what the current condition is. However, in staff's opinion, the wood fascia and wood brackets are character-defining features of the building's Georgian Revival style. Removal of these features impacts the building's historical integrity. Additionally, the full text version of the Secretary of the Interior Standards for Rehabilitation does not recommend replacement of deteriorated wood features with something that does not convey the same visual appearance. The metal fascia introduces a new material and presents a new visual appearance compared to what was there before and historically. Staff finds that in-kind replacement of the wood fascia and wood brackets would be more appropriate. The Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation also note that failure to identify, evaluate, and treat the causes of wood deterioration, including plant material growing too close to wood surfaces, impedes the ability to protect and maintain wood features. Therefore, staff recommends conditioning the removal of other vines on the building in order to prevent future damage to the fascia brackets and also the masonry. CPED staff recommend that the Heritage Preservation Commission adopt staff findings and approves the certificate of appropriateness to replace the fascia at the Hinkle House, which is an individual landmark located at 619 10th Street South, subject to the following conditions. Number 1, the metal fascia shall be removed and replaced with wood to replicate the historic design. Number 2, the wood brackets shall be reconstructed to replicate the historic design. Number 3, the vines should be removed from the building to avoid further deterioration. And then the 2 standard conditions of approval. Staff have not received any correspondence pertaining to this project. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to stay for questions. The applicant is also here today and would like to make a presentation.
Thank you for that report. Commissioners, are there questions? I have one. You have, the first 2 conditions, you have shalls, and the third is a should. Is there a reason for that? I'm not a legal mind, so I need to ask these questions.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Howard, for the question. Staff discussed this and was intentional with the use of the verbiage here. You know, the subject of the application is specifically about the roof line, the fascia, and the brackets. The rest of the walls are not really part of the scope of work, but it is a recommendation based on our reading of the Secretary of the Interior standards that could help future preservation of the roof line.
So as written, that isn't if they don't remove it, there's nothing we can go back on. There's no recourse related to a should compared to a shall.
Yes,
It's
that
just
is
a
my
recommendation.
understanding, but I'll
My
defer to Andrea Burke.
Andrea Burke, Supervisor for the Historic Preservation Team. It still is a condition, but it is written in a way that it doesn't hold the weight of a shall.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Any other questions? I think that's it. I will now open the public hearing for this item. Is the applicant here and would like to speak? Please be sure to state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Michael Fay. I own Hinkle Mansion LLC, which owns the building. I purchased the building about 12 to 13 years ago. It's currently used for my law firm as well as another law firm that we rent some of the space to. To put it mildly, this building, the amount of upkeep required for it is virtually impossible for any small business to handle. Since we've moved in, every furnace, there's four floors, there's a furnace on each floor, has died. Every air conditioner on every floor has died. The roof leaked. I don't know where the pictures are on here. Maybe Rachel can help me. We've got major water damage in the place. That's one of the closets. Can you see that?
I don't know how it goes on that screen. There it goes.
So that's some of the water damage in one of the closets. There's stains on the ceilings. The front spindles, if you look at the front of the house, they're all rotted and need to be replaced. The bid for that alone, if you're gonna try to replace exactly the same spindles that are there, it's close to $50,000. We spent $70,000 on the roof. We put in all new sod and irrigation system because the city came and redid everything on the street and ruined the yard, but didn't fix it. So the long and the short of it is the statute 599.660 says We have to prevent deterioration, and we have to maintain the property. I get that. But it has to be reasonable. We have all sorts of squirrels. The place is already burnt down once. The squirrels have gotten in. They have cut all the electrical wires. We've had to have people go through the ceiling. The electrician said there's a really good chance of a fire because of the problems. So we've got to be able to maintain the integrity of the building, make it look nice, but make sure it doesn't burn down and make sure that it doesn't flood out. So we're stuck. If you look through the pictures in the report, there were massive size holes in the fascia up there. If this building was completely redone in 1997, it's been less than 25 years and it's already like that. The bid that we had to replace it with wood was $78,000. It's not financially feasible. It doesn't change the way the building looks. This building has changed its looks 20 times in the 100 years that it's been. I think it looks as good now as it ever has. The metal fascia that we put up looks amazing. It looks clean. It doesn't change the historical nature of the building. And most importantly, it allows it to be here for another 100 years. Because if we don't have something like that, no one's going to pay $78,000 every 20 years to be able to keep rodents out and squirrels out and have the roof from collapsing. So I've got a lot more work to do on this place. We're doing our best, but it has to be, I think, a reasonable amount. I love the building. I want it to look great. But I also realize I have to keep it safe. So that's all I ask.
Thank you for those comments. Commissioners, do you have questions of the applicant? Go ahead.
Just to clarify, of the staff's recommendations, do you have specific conditions that you're looking for us to strike? I'm gathering it's the fascia.
Yeah.
Do you have issues with any of the other staff conditions?
Well, first and foremost, keeping the metal fascia is the most important because of the continued problems we've had with squirrels. We don't have one squirrel or two squirrels. We have hundreds of squirrels, and they're really, really causing damage to the building. I'm just pulling up okay, so you're recommending the metal fascia be removed and replaced. We would ask that the metal fascia remain. As I said, I think if you drive by the building and if you look at it, I think it looks really nice, and I don't think it impacts the way it looks and the historical nature of it. 2, that wood bracket should be reconstructed to replicate the historical design. I assume that they're talking about the little, like, wooden key note things. I don't know if there's a way that if there's a material that exists that could look like that wasn't, or if it could somehow attach wood to it, paint it, I don't know. If the committee has any restoration people that might know that. But as I said, we would oppose that as well because I think it doesn't change the way the building looks, and it certainly keeps the integrity of the building much safer in the long run. So in 100 years, it's still there as well. We certainly can, while we're not required to, can have someone come out and pull down some of the vines. There are a lot of vines on there, and we had talked about keeping some and trying to rip some off just to clean it up a little bit because it gets much in the summer. So, as I said, I love the building. I appreciate the historical nature of the building. I love going there every day. I want it to be around, but I have to keep it safe. I have to keep it maintained. And you have to make a decision on what's more important, keeping it here in 100 years or having a problem with wiring and water and having it be gone. So that's where we're at.
Thank you. Does
Thank you.
that answer questions? Any other questions for the applicant? I don't see any. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak for or against this application?
My builder is here.
Oh.
Thank you.
Be sure to state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name's Joe Haas with Evergreen Construction. Do you want my business or home? I'll give you my business.
That's fine.
All right, 4450 Aaron Drive, Suite 100B, Egan 55122.
Thank you.
So when we started the process for the roof restoration, we did anticipate some issues with the fascia line. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I was pretty honored to get the job and work on the Hinkle House. So from day one, we were totally in the spirit of preserving the building forever. You know, I'm a big fan of Lost Twin Cities on PBS. I watch all that, you know, all the stuff that's been torn down and whatnot. So right out of the gate, we wanted to make sure we honored the historic value of it. When we looked at the project and we started the roof, the fascia line, like I was mentioning, we anticipated not much, just a couple boards here and there that would not disturb anything. But then what happened was the squirrels completely dilapidated everything. The dental wood, cedar, was clearly not of any historic origins. I don't know what kind of wood it was specifically, but he decommissioned the third floor of his building, turned off all the electrical because of the squirrels getting in. You know, I wanted to make that point that we thought it would just be a couple boards here and there, and they had mentioned it. You know, he's a very busy business attorney in town, and he mentioned that there's a squirrel thing. You know, I'm like, you mentioned it. It was there, but so when we did the work, as we went into the fascia, it just pretty much fell off the building. And when we went to do it, Critique is here. We talked about, you know, what we were going to have to do, and we were, I guess I'll take responsibility. We were unaware that this was outside the scope of the permit we had pulled. So we do take, you know, responsibility for that. And there was also just the practicality of it, of like, I would not put wood. And if you go around town, any of these buildings, it's not wood. It's like FIPON that they use, some type of polyurethane. It's a hard material that you can paint. But when we restored the subfascia, we put on the metal that I thought, okay, the problem of the roof structure, the infestation of squirrels is over now, and the building integrity is preserved, and nothing can happen now. And I guess, you know, that was what I led with on the job. So that's it in a nutshell.
Well, thank you for the comments, and thank you for that additional context on the history of what happened. Are there any others who wish to speak for or against this application? Not seeing any. You can go ahead and take your seat. Thanks. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, let's discuss. Commissioner Melblom.
Chair Howard, thank you. So are there examples of projects, because the contractor mentioned the same thing that I was thinking, so now that the wood brackets are gone, could they be reconstructed out of something that was not wood, and would that be normally acceptable? I guess I'll ask the historians on our commission if you could opine on some of that, because that seems like a logical compromise.
And thank you for those comments. Does anyone want to respond to that? When it comes to the standards and using substitute materials, imitative materials. I always look to my architects, just so you know. Vice Chair Sandbolt.
Yeah, I would say that in general, it's preferable to use the similar material to what the historic material was. So in this case, it would be a wood material. That being said, in some cases, it is appropriate to use a replacement material, a different material, from a perspective of it's not historic material and we would be replacing it holistically. It might be appropriate to use a different material. That material, though, would have to match kind of the surface characteristics and the paintability and that kind of thing that wood would have provided. So there is some flexibility, especially in the scenario we're in here. I think that we're not replacing historic material. It's historic material was already gone at this point.
Thank you, Vice Chair Sandbolt. Does that answer your question?
Chair Howard and Vice Chair Sandbolt, yes, thank you very much. It just makes me feel that being that there is an issue, and I think anybody who has dealt with squirrels understands that once they go in there, there's a kind of a innate tendency to want to keep going back to that same place. You do have to, I understand why the metal was put there, because they can't chew through the metal. So are there other options that actually might work better where we can recreate the aesthetic that was existed that's been taken off already and do it in a way that is going to be more durable over time?
Yeah. I have seen squirrels go through metal, but I assume this is a higher gauge than stuff that I've seen. Any other comments or conversation here at the dais? Commissioners, what are your thoughts? Secretary Vandereyck.
I'm just going to throw my thoughts out here and see if that engages additional commentary, because I don't know quite where I feel like I'm landing on a decision here. I guess I would disagree with the applicant's take that this doesn't take away from the historic nature of the property. I feel pretty strongly that it does, that it's a significant change to the facade's design. Understanding that this has been changed multiple times throughout the history of the building, I think that's worth noting. If we had been a part of this dialogue, or if this had been talked about with staff prior to the change, perhaps there would have been some other solution where there could have been some backing that could have been installed behind the wood material, so that we would still have the look of the wood but be able to protect the roof. We're not able to do that now. So the only option that I feel like is before us, notwithstanding some other option that we don't know about right now, and going back to previous discussions that we've had about trying to avoid designing buildings on behalf of the applicant on the dais, is to either, I guess, strike this condition or to get it removed and redone, which is also doesn't feel great either. We can't make decisions based on cost. I think that's an important thing to note for our applicant. I understand certainly the impact of cost and the impact of that on a multifamily project, and what that means for everything coming back from that. But we have a fairly slim window within which we can make decisions and we can make calls. And it's my sense that this does change the historic facade, and that I'm not really sure what the right decision is here. So I would really appreciate some feedback from the rest of the commission to help me make that decision.
Thank you, Secretary Vandereyck. I agree. I think the change is pretty dramatic with the metal fascia. I am also open to the idea of possibly looking at substitute materials in this situation, given the fact that it isn't original fabric that was removed. There might be some options there. current wood is going to be as susceptible to squirrels as the wood that was put in 97. Other thoughts? Commissioner Maston?
Commissioner Van Der Eyck, you really summed up my thoughts right now in that it is a very difficult decision that I wasn't expecting it to be this difficult walking in. Because I do agree that it does change the appearance of the building and the integrity of that historic appearance. But we do know things have been removed, and the wood is proving to be problematic with the resident animals. I don't know. There's a squirrel problem.
They can be so cute
I
in
know.
certain times.
And I know we don't want to design from the dais, but I just want to note that buildings of this era, you will oftentimes see like a pressed metal. And I don't know that that would be any more affordable, but it would be more difficult for a squirrel to get through. But I feel like I'm opening a can of worms just by even saying that. But I think there are other materials maybe that could be explored that could provide kind of a happy medium here. So
Thank you for those comments, Commissioner Maston. Anyone else have any thoughts, or would someone like to make a motion? Commissioner Melblom?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Howard. I'll make a motion. I'd like to make a motion that the Heritage Preservation Commission adopt the staff findings and approve the certificate of appropriateness application by Joe Haas of Evergreen Construction Company, Inc., on behalf of Michael J. Fay of Fay and Associates LLC to replace the fascia at the Hinkle House, which is an individual landmark located at 619 10th Street South. But I would like to amend conditions 1 and 2 and leave conditions, let me make sure I get the numbers right, 3, 4, and 5 as is. So I would like to amend condition 1 to say the metal fascia shall be removed and replaced with wood or similar material approved by HPC staff to replicate the historic design. And condition number 2, I would like to change to say the wood brackets shall be reconstructed to replicate the historic design or replaced with brackets constructed of materials approved by HPC staff. And I'll just say both of these are in the service of trying to give flexibility with the material that's used.
Thank you for that motion. Is there a second?
Maston seconds.
Thank you, Commissioner Maston. I want to make sure that Kendall has the conditions down. Good. All right. Any further discussion?
One other comment I just wanted to make, thank you for making that motion, and I agree. Towards the end there, we talked about, because I wanted to, the reason I asked the question I did was that there's the 3 conditions really, 2 about the wood fascia and then 1 about the vines. So I just want to clarify for the record that the condition reads that the vines should be removed from the building to avoid further deterioration. We're not changing that condition, and I feel strongly that condition should stay. Vines can wreak havoc on brick, and especially this volume of vines. So I just want to make sure that it was understood for the record that the vines needed to be removed as a part of this condition.
Thank you, Secretary Van Der Eyck, and that's the understanding I had. So, any other discussion? Seeing none, shall we call the roll?
Commissioner Bjornberg.
Aye.
Booty.
Aye.
Chair Howard.
Aye.
Maston.
Aye.
Melblom.
Aye.
Nystrom.
Aye.
Vice Chair Sandbolt.
Aye.
Struthers.
Aye.
Van Der Eyck.
Aye.
There are 9 ayes.
Thank you. That motion passes. And that concludes our public hearing items. Our next item is item number 8, Washburn Fair Oaks Historic District Design Guidelines, staff memo presented by Dr. John Hedstrom.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. My name is John Hedstrom, and I'm pleased to be before you this evening to discuss the update to the Washburn Fair Oaks Historic District Design Guidelines. CPED is updating these design guidelines. It was designated, the district itself was designated in 1976, and that's when the design guidelines were adopted as well. So they're older. We were pleased to receive a $30,000 federal certified local government grant to update these design guidelines, and we added in a $20,000 local match. We hired Pigeon Consulting and 10 by 10 to rewrite these design guidelines and conduct community engagement. Pigeon Consulting and 10 by 10 hosted 2 community meetings and 3 focus groups. Following completion of a full draft of the design guidelines this past June, CPED put these guidelines online for a 30-day public comment period. While some commenters felt the design guidelines were clear, others felt they were a bit overwhelming. So we reduced and clarified aspects of the guidelines that you see before you in response. The revised design guidelines have been organized to include design guidance for existing buildings and new construction. They don't differentiate between contributing and non-contributing buildings in the same way that the Secretary of the Interior standards do not. Instead, treatment guidance is recommended equally for all buildings in the district to manage change and preserve integrity, with a key focus being on the preservation and repair of historic materials. Subsections are further categorized by building features such as fenestration, roofs, and walls. The guidelines for existing buildings include a specific section for additions, and there's an independent section for accessory buildings. There are also separate sections for mechanical equipment and trash enclosures, and landscapes and public realm infrastructure. This layout appeared to fit the needs of this specific historic district and its resources. The design guidelines, as with all our design guidelines, they work in conjunction with the zoning code, and where conflicting guidance exists, the more restrictive provision applies. The new guidelines differ from the existing 5-page historic district design guidelines in the following ways. They are more detailed and explicit from the existing 1976 design guidelines. They include a map and inventory of contributing and non-contributing resources developed during the last year's certified local government grant-funded work, and you'll find those in the last 7 pages of the design guidelines. Guidance is specific and differentiated between existing buildings, new construction, additions, and accessory buildings. Last but not least, guidance is provided for mechanical equipment, trash enclosures, landscapes, and public realm infrastructure. Local and state law requires the State Historic Preservation Office review all proposed historic district and landmark design guidelines. But before this, we would request your feedback on these guidelines, in particular on their organization, specific guidance, readability, and graphics. We will bring the final draft of these guidelines back to you for adoption in a public hearing next spring, at which time members of the public can give testimony. This is the point in the presentation where I would kind of like to open it up to you and obtain any feedback you have.
Thank you, Dr. Hedstrom. We're opening up to commissioner comments on this. I wanted to start with just a couple basic questions. You mentioned that you got comments back. I'm wondering, how many comments did we get back? Did you get lots of comments back from the community?
We did receive lots of comments from the community, Chair Howard, members of the commission. More so in our 2 community meetings and 3 focus groups. Not as many on the draft itself, which I think is hopefully a good sign that the draft that you see before you generally met the public's, or in particular, historic district resident and property owners' concerns following the input we took at those community meetings and focus groups.
I'm curious because some of the things I was surprised to see was the treatment of solar panels and the absence of any mention of rain gardens. And I know that in the community meetings that I was part of, sustainability stuff came up quite a bit, and so I'm just not seeing a lot of that in the guidelines. So it's my understanding when we look at these again in the spring, that will be a time for public comment. So the community, people living in the neighborhood would have that opportunity again to provide public comment on the guidelines, correct?
Chair Howard, that is absolutely right. I would point out, too, that Design Guideline 1.45, in that first section, Design Guidelines for Existing Buildings, does specifically call out the use of solar panels or shingles, and generally treats them the way the Secretary of the Interior Standards for Sustainability treat them,
Yeah.
more or less. And we do have sections on those same features in the guidelines for new construction.
Yeah, I just know it was a big discussion at the one that I was at.
You're right.
At
It
one of
certainly was.
the meetings I was at. So I was, I know that the community would have comments on that. So, other comments from commission? Did I hear something down there? Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Howard, Andrea Burke. I wanted to comment on your question, adding a little bit more context to John's presentation. We received a draft from the consultant in June. We did open it up to public comment. I believe we received a total of 2 comments, maybe 3. From that point, our staff did engage in heavy revisions to the draft. There was a lot we needed to add. There was a lot we wanted to change, and the consultant's contract was complete at that point in time. At this discussion, I think this is a point where if you have requests such as you had just mentioned regarding solar panels or rain gardens, this is the time to make that known, because the draft has not been sent to the State Historic Preservation Office. And what ideally we would like to do is to have the draft that comes through free adoption be as polished as possible for the public to have a full understanding of what may actually go through, as opposed to having comments or revisions at the 11th hour would be staff's request. So if you have big changes, requests, anything at all, please make them known tonight if you can. Thank you.
Thank you. Related to the solar panels, the big thing I saw is we need a definition of minimally visible. That's used twice, and I know it has been a big issue in the neighborhood. We denied solar panels for one of the properties there, and I want to make sure that they understand the guidelines that are going through related to those. Commissioner Melblom.
I do have a question. Dr. Hedstrom, there's no mention of anything in the landscaping, or did I miss that? Let me ask the question differently. Is the landscaping anywhere within the district seen as historic and worthwhile of being preserved?
Chair Howard, Commissioner Melblom, yes, to an extent. Our consultants went through last year using a previous certified local government grant that we were pleased to receive. They went through and identified, in particular, historic elements of Washburn Fair Oaks Park. They did not identify a tremendous number of them, but they did identify some. And so the very first design guideline in Section 5, Guidelines for Landscape and Public Realm Infrastructure, does very explicitly state that historic designed landscapes shall be retained. And we should retain that. The very last guideline states that instruct staff and the HPC to retain existing historic sidewalks, walkways, and driveways if possible.
But there's no, so thank you. I must have just read past that, but looking at that, would it be clear to somebody in the district whether their landscape is historic or not? I'm just trying to think of, if I owned a piece of property there, how would I determine whether I can, dig up the yard, put in a rain garden, or could I take out all the historic, what would have been turf, most likely at that time, and put in, a perennial garden of wildflowers.
Chair Howard, Commissioner Melblom, our consultants did not identify any particular historic design landscapes or historic landscapes on properties outside of the parks in the district. And even there, again, they found minimal historic features. Generally speaking, it's been staff's policy in the past not to regulate maintenance or removal of simpler landscape items. We have permitted rain gardens in the past. If they're, I think very rarely we have perhaps, seen sort of a heritage tree or something that appeared to be very large and date back to the period of significance. In those areas, we might address concerns with an applicant about the possible removal of that. Not that they would necessarily, well, I'll just leave it at that. But generally speaking, property owners would not know they had a historic landscape because we have not identified historic landscapes on their private property.
So would it make sense then to address that in here in some manner? Just to add some kind of clarity about that? So that if none of you are here in 10 years and somebody goes and looks at this, they don't go off in a whole different direction.
Ms. Burke?
Chair Howard and Commissioner Melblom, if I may jump in to try to help provide some clarification. Commissioner Melblom, are you asking whether or not we would go out and survey the properties ourselves to identify which landscape features are historic?
Not necessarily. I guess what I'm looking for is that if there are, what I'm trying to get past is somebody owns a house and they want to rip out their yard and put a rain garden in. They could do that because it's not going to affect the historic integrity of the building. And it's not really affecting the historic integrity, I think, and many of us would agree. Some people wouldn't. And that's why I'm trying to get some clarity on that, because I think over time, we're going to move away from traditional lawns to things that are different, be they rain gardens or perennial yards or maybe even non-vegetated yards.
Chair Howard and Commissioner Melblom, to answer your question, I agree. So that was very much kept in mind when we revised this section on landscape features, because as John had mentioned, we are not in the business of telling people what flowers and hedges to plant or which ones to rip up. I don't believe that is a part of this district or a feature. However, at the same time, we acknowledge that in this particular district, due to its age and due to the list of resources and the type of resources there could be potentially some historic design, like actually designed features. Could it be a pathway, or could it be a particular wall that was designed as part of perhaps some of the larger resources in this district? And so we wanted to write design guidelines that were, quite frankly, gray enough, left enough of a gray area so that is a possibility, if those were identified, to be able to make a recommendation to see if they could be preserved, but also leave it open enough so that people could do such that you describe in terms of rain gardens and not requiring everybody to have lawns. That was a discussion that was held among these guidelines, and I firmly believe that is not something we should regulate in this district.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah, thank you for the questions. It begs the question to me, who is the audience for these design guidelines? Is it the people who live in the district, or is it for staff, or is it for commissioners? We've got design guidelines that are very technical here. It's not really written for the public. We have no graphics. I chuckled when you asked about comments back on graphics, because we have no graphics to respond to in here. I don't know who the audience is for this document. I'm a little concerned about what I'm seeing. Just not knowing who's supposed to be using it. And knowing the things I heard from the community about sustainability, especially whether it was rain gardens or using prairie lawns or things like that instead of manicured grass, I would hope that if the design guidelines, if the purpose is for the community to be able to use it, that it would be very clear that they could do those sorts of things as long as they're not impacting a historic landscape, a historic design landscape. And I don't think that comes across in the guidelines as it's currently written. Commissioner Melblom?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Howard, because I agree with what you said. I think part of what's always helpful about guidelines is that they delineate clearly what's in consideration and what's out. And so I think that in many places it's pretty clear what's not, what you want to be in consideration of being under the purview of historic review. And the landscaping is one of the areas that I feel like it needs a little bit more meat there to kind of make the line clear. And Chair Howard made the comment about this being text heavy. That wasn't the phrase you used, but that's what I thought. And I think actually having some example photos and diagrams would really help, because a lot of people see things visually as opposed to comprehend what text is telling them. I think that would be a big help. And then kind of my last comment would be that when I was talking recently to people from Pigeon, knowing that this was coming, I asked do you have anything that you wish you would have done differently now? They said, well, the one thing that wasn't included but might be something to look at would be that the Park Service has revised Preservation Brief 16, which now allows, it now opens up alternate materials, which kind of ties back to our previous conversation. And so that might be something for staff to look at or to get advice on, like how should that feed into these guidelines so that they align with current NPS thinking on that issue.
Thank you, Commissioner Melblom. Other comments? Vice Chair Sandbolt's getting her flag ready. Go ahead.
I have a couple of things. As I was reading through, I got to the key definitions section, and I was surprised how short it was, and then realized that there was a key terms section later, and so I would recommend that those two be combined, just kind of a formatting thing. I agree with the comments about the landscape. I think the document currently is a little too vague about, I think that the exact wording was along the lines of, historic designed landscapes shall be retained. I think that guideline just needs a little more building out, because for all the reasons that have been discussed here. I had one other. Oh, the period of significance is listed as 1863 to 1939, and there's, under that section, there's not really any statement of reasoning. I understand that the reasoning behind a period of significance can be a very extensive explanation, but maybe if there's some way to paraphrase, I think it would be really helpful for kind of perpetuity to understand approximately what the reasoning was for selecting that period of significance. And then I had just one more thing I noticed, and this is a pretty specific item, but in the doors section 1.22 guideline, it says historic doors, transoms, and sidelights with transparent glazing shall not be covered with opaque materials, notwithstanding permitted window signs. And I was unclear with the way that is worded, if it means that window signs would be permitted or that window signs are not allowable because they would be considered opaque. I think those are my major comments. I'll check my notes.
Thank you, Commissioner Vanderbilt.
Combined. Let's put you both together.
Thank you, Vice Chair Sanderbolt. And you brought up the idea, the need for additional context related to the significance. I think that again, that's all. Who is the audience for this document? When I'm doing training on design guidelines, I look at the most successful design guidelines are those that are written for the public. And they explain the significance of the properties, they explain the contributing, non-contributing, they show the do's and do nots, and they have diagrams that the public can understand. Just having a simple statement that it's significant for X, Y, and Z reasons can help the public understand quite a bit. Other thoughts from the commission? I can't mix up the names the opposite direction. Go ahead.
I'd like to see you try. I don't really have anything to add. I think the comments made were great. But yeah, I just would echo the thing about if the idea here is to create design guidelines that lessen applications that have to go back and forth with the public, meaning that the design guidelines are meant to primarily drive public consumption of what they can and cannot do with their property. Maybe an executive summary might be useful, and so with more diagrams, like that this is the meat and bones of this, and this is very technical, and people can dive into it. But if there's some way, it's a lot of documents I just read the executive summary. So that would maybe be a recommendation. And I don't like the font.
I suspect that's a city-approved font, and we won't have a choice in the matter on that one.
Chair Howard, I guess question from staff. Do you want us to respond to some of the comments that you are making? Because we have, I can tell you responses to why certain things were done the way they were. I don't know if this is the appropriate forum, but at the same time, I don't really know another place that it would happen. And it's not to be meant as okay, well, we did it this way as a kind of an argument, but more of just to provide some context for how we got to the document that where we are today. That's all. But I leave it up to you.
I don't know that I need responses on the stuff that I've brought up, although I have one more thing I want to bring up. I'm not seeing anyone desperate for responses. I'm going to state again, I say this every time we try to apply standards to a non-contributing building, there should be something for non-contributing buildings in here. And I know that your memo says the standards and guidelines don't differentiate. The standards are for historic properties. And historic properties have significance and integrity. Non-contributing buildings are missing one or both of those things. They either don't have significance, they can't help convey the significance of the district, or they don't have enough integrity to convey the significance of the district. And I have a really tough time trying to take very specific design guidelines written for buildings that are built in, say, 1900, and applying it to a non-contributing building built in 2006. I don't understand why we've never done that before in Minneapolis design guidelines. I think it adds more work to all of the staff. I think it adds more work to the commission. And I think it sets expectations for the community that we're treating the entire district and everything built all the way up until 2023 with that same, what was Bonnie McDonald's phrase, the culture of preciousness. And I just think that sets us up for future failure. In my opinion, non-contributing buildings can be treated similar to new construction. And looking at the same sort of design guidelines that we put together for new construction. You have a building that it may be of the right age, it's been mucked beyond recognition that it can't convey. Why couldn't it follow the guidelines for new construction. It's my opinion. I've been saying it for every year that I've been on this commission, and I've been probably saying it for my entire career. Unfortunately, the Park Service does not give us district guidelines. They don't tell us that. But the standards are written for historic properties, and we have non-contributing buildings that don't have integrity or are built in 2006. And I just have a really tough time applying those same standards. So I don't need a response. I'm just putting it on the record because it's something that I feel very strongly about, and we've had issues with this for as long as I've been on the commission.
Chair Howard, if I may, I do feel it is important that I respond to this one.
Okay.
Because this was a very, very, very big topic that came up in the drafting of this design guidelines and then as our future design guidelines as we're going forward. Because we made a very specific decision to change the way that this was handled because of your comments that have been coming up in this and the treatment of contributing and non-contributing buildings. And the reason that it didn't go forward with separate guidelines for non-contributing buildings is because we actually tried to write another set of guidelines that way, and it ended up being such a disaster because they ended up essentially saying almost the same thing with just very few things left out, and it almost became the fact that we had two almost identical set of guidelines with different sets. And then we also heard a lot at these community meetings that there is concern that non-contributing buildings, which they can, but they still get considered and they still get reviewed, can just be, removed carte blanche. And that raises a lot of concern for people. However, we still have to review them under the set of guidelines. And so we made the distinction to make a change in terms of historic material and not historic material, and using the same guidelines for, and you may not agree, but using the same guidelines for all of them, but differentiating between historic features and historic material and non-historic features and non-historic material, and made that distinction so that it could be applied across the board, but there is still the distinction between those contributing and non-contributing buildings in terms of alterations that have happened, and being able to streamline that and apply that a little bit easier across the board because we have these, because we still will have a non-contributing that may want to replace a rubber garage door that we have to come forward and bring to you because we wouldn't recommend it. But then there comes a discussion, well, it's non-contributing. It may be non-contributing, but it still has an impact to the rest of the district, and there is a degree of flexibility that can be applied, so we tried to consider that in the application of it. So I just wanted to state that for the record, but just saying that we very much have heard that, and it's a conversation we handle on a daily basis.
Yeah, I'm sure you do much more than we do. I don't think that comes across in the guidelines as written. It might help then to have a section that talks about the difference between contributing and non-contributing buildings and how the guidelines apply to them. And maybe that's a paragraph or two, saying contributing buildings, if the audience is the public, contributing buildings are those buildings that help convey the significance of the building. The utmost importance is the material integrity, the form, blah, 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 blah. Non-contributing buildings, whatever. And there's more flexibility in applying these so that the community understands that there's more flexibility. I don't think it's coming across at all as written.
Chair Howard, I believe there is a section in there that says that.
Okay, I didn't see a section that said how it was applied when you're doing the review, but
Okay.
I can look at it again.
Yeah.
Commissioner Bjornberg.
I was like, I've never had so many people turn at the same time. I just want to echo that I am very much agreeing with Chair Howard and what is being stated here. And I think that the sort of non-distinction between contributing and non-contributing, while I can understand that was a very thoughtful decision, and can very much respect the conversation that went into it, I think that this sort of comes back around to who is the audience, and is that intention coming through the way that it's written. Because I think that listening to this conversation, I bet that we can all understand the distinctions that are being made, but somebody from outside of this room is going to have no idea and be really lost, is my perspective. So I guess I would say I don't know what the engagement process has been throughout this, but I have heard you guys talk about public meetings and focus groups, and having this open for additional comments. And I would just sort of encourage, I don't know, us, you, all of us, whatever, to think about who this is for, how it's being digested, and if that is coming across, or if there are ways to more clearly articulate the intentions behind some of the decisions to make it easier for people to understand as they are trying to apply that for their own work.
Thank you, Commissioner Bjornberg. There is the contributing, non-contributing. I looked it up while she was providing her thoughts, and it just talks about the number of parcels that are different, not how the design guidelines are applied. Commissioner Malcolm.
I'll tie us back to an earlier string of kind of thoughts that we had added. I think this is a good example of where photographs and diagrams would be helpful, because I think that if this is a document that the general public are going to look at, and it's certainly people that own property in the district are looking at, it would be really helpful for them to be able to begin to understand why something is relevant and why something is not relevant to being historic fabric. And I think that, like the warehouse district guidelines, I think are really nice that way, because they have all those nice little hand-drawn diagrams that kind of clearly articulate what is part of the character-defining features of buildings in the warehouse district, and even some examples of things that are not. So I would just urge you to add some graphics, because I think it'll help tell the story better to people who are not predisposed to understand the terminology used in these documents.
Yeah, some commissions use design guidelines as a way of educating the general public, the people who live within the district, specifically on those sorts of things that would benefit from images. And I think the design guidelines for both of our warehouse districts are extensive and probably overwhelming in a different way. But the graphics are nice when you're trying to explain something that doesn't make sense to people who don't live and breathe preservation standards all the time. Other thoughts? Do you feel like you have enough from us? You got.
I almost ran.
Should I
out of
send an
paper,
email?
So I was really sweating it up here. But let me just say thank you very much to Commissioner Maston and Chair Howard for participating in these focus groups and community meetings. Your assistance there in communicating to members of the public and obtaining their input, and tonight sharing that testimony with your colleagues here has been invaluable. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And the community that lives in this district, they love their district. It was very evident in the discussions I was part of, and they want to see it preserved. So that's positive. They're passionate. That's a good word. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Hedstrom. All right. We're going on to item number 9. Oh, wait. I need to vote to receive and file these, right? Okay. So would anyone like to make a motion to receive and file the draft design guidelines? Thank you, Commissioner Struthers. Is there a second?
Maston seconds.
Thank you, Commissioner Maston. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? All right. Now we'll go on to item number 9, the January-February 2024 Heritage Preservation Commission calendar adoption. The staff memo was prepared by Andrea Burke, but I understand Ken is going to give us some background on this one. Go ahead.
if I can figure out how to use the microphone. Hello, Chair Howard and Commissioners. I'm Ken Daler, Manager of Legislative Support Services in the Clerk's Office. I know Ms. Burke provided a little bit of context in your memo about why we're only adopting the first 2 months of the year, and that is because of the transition in the new council. Even though most of the members will be the same in the new council, they still reorganize themselves in January. They may or may not have different committees and a different structure. So until they finalize their calendar, all of the other independent bodies are a little bit on hold because we have limited broadcast space. So we need to kind of finish their calendar before we can roll out the remainder of the calendars. But while we're talking about calendars, I wanted to give you another update that some of you may have had or not had. And we're getting very close to it happening. But the third floor of City Hall is going to be renovated next year, which means we will not have access to this space. So for next year, we are building a new temporary council chambers that is going to be in the Public Service Center, which is the old city building at Kitty Corner. It is 250 South 4th Street. So we're finishing. We're finishing construction of a temporary council chamber on the third floor of that building. If any of you have ever visited that space, it's the old Development Review. What was it called? Development Review? Whatever.
Yeah.
It was but it was like the public service counter to turn in land use applications. So we've taken over that space and are building a temporary chamber with the intent of having our council meetings there, as well as all the other independent bodies that have their meetings in here and broadcast and live stream them as well. However, before we transition to that space, we're going to have a few weeks, about a month probably, where we will not have access to either space. So during your probably with the calendar we're looking at for tonight, this will likely only affect your January 16th meeting. Your final meeting in December will still be, no, that's not true. It will not be in here. This is your last meeting in here.
Okay.
December 7th is the last day. Am I right? Sorry, I should have been more prepared. It's been a busy week. December 7th is the last day we're going to use this chamber. And I believe your final meeting is December 12th. Yep. So on December 12th, and then your first meeting in January, on January 16th, will be in the Public Service Building, room 100, which is across the street, Kitty Corner on the other side. It's the same building we've held the study session retreats, but we'll be on the first floor, which is a bigger space. We're kind of building a temporary chambers in there to utilize essentially from mid-December to mid-January while we're finalizing and getting all the broadcast capability ready for the Public Service Center. So the long story short is pay very close attention to the location of meetings for the next month or two, and hopefully by the end of January we are in our temporary space in PSC, Public Service Center. We will be in there for at least all of 2024. That's the plan right now. I think there's always a likelihood it'll be a little bit longer, but let us know if you have any questions, but we'll be sure to keep you in the loop about additional location changes. But for right now, you can plan on your next two meetings being in the PSC, and then PSB, Public Service Building, and then we'll transition to the PSC on your January 30th meeting.
I would love to see the staging plans for all of this. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Andrea, did you have anything to add to that before we adopt?
Chair Howard, no, I don't. Ken covered it quite well.
All right, thank you both. Commissioners, are there any
Chair
questions?
Howard, yes. Sorry, I didn't know you were going to ask.
Yeah.
I just want to, Kendall, can you absolutely make a blinking sign to make sure I am going to
Yes, I will.
absolutely forget everything Ken just said.
I will put it in the emails.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Any other questions, commissioners? All right, seeing none, would someone like to make a motion to adopt the January-February 2024 Heritage Preservation Commission calendar?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Melblom. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Vice Chair Sandobolt. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? All right, that concludes our discussion items. Thank you very much. Now we'll move on to announcements, and I'll start with staff.
Thank you, Chair Howard. I would while we're talking of calendars, I wanted to circle back with the commission. Is 2 retreats a year still a good number for retreats? We have not drawn up the calendar, but I'd like to include them at the start of the year. Generally, last year we did them in spring and fall. Is that still a time that people think is a reasonable time to hold them? Okay, thank you. Also, updates, we do have a request for proposals out for a resurvey of our 5th Street Southeast Historic District, similar to Washburn Fair Oaks. With some of our older districts, we are resurveying them to get some updates, get a little bit better contributing, non-contributing lists, also getting an identified period of significance with justification, and also getting a little bit more narrative history on some of the resources. Some of our information from the mid-'70s is very scant. So that is out at the moment, and that will be closing within a week or so here. But that is our next CLG project for 2024. We are also actively working on, we're engaging right now on the Dinkytown Historic Design Guidelines. I won't give a full outline at this point in time, but we held our first engagement meeting on November 2nd in person with interested stakeholders on those design guidelines. We received some comments, not necessarily on the guidelines themselves, more about some other past decisions on the district. But then we are also following up with a virtual meeting on December 14th with those that would like to attend as well, where we hope to, we right now are soliciting some comments on a draft of the design guidelines that is out on our website, and hope to address any comments received on that, as well as dig into some of the details of the design guidelines at this virtual meeting with interested parties. So if any commissioners would be interested in attending, you are welcome to. Just let me know. As long as you do not have quorum, I can invite you to this virtual meeting. If you would like to listen, I think it's always helpful sometimes to have a commissioner listening, and should a question be directed to them, having that ability. So that concludes my updates. Thank you.
Thank you. And you forwarded a message from Michael Coop for a Nick Shippo survey. I haven't looked at the questions, but it has to do with standards and guidelines.
It does.
Might factor into the conversation we just had. So be sure to look at that and fill things out. Any other announcements from staff or commissioners? Seeing none, with that, we've completed all the items on our agenda for this meeting. I'll ask members and staff once more if there are any matters that need to come before the commission. There being no other business to come before this meeting, and without objection, I will declare the meeting adjourned. The next regular meeting of the Heritage Preservation Commission is Tuesday, December 12th, 2023, in the Public Service Building.
Center.
Building.
Building is right. I am so sorry.
It's the building.
I've been struggling with this for months. It will be in the Public Service Building, which is 505 South 4th Avenue, room 100.
Which is where we had our retreat, that building.
Correct.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't know why we couldn't have better names, like more distinct names.
Thank you all.